For over half a century, the legend of a daring skyjacker known as D.B. Cooper has remained one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. He was a man who vanished into a stormy November sky over the Pacific Northwest, taking $200,000 with him and turning into a myth that has baffled the FBI for decades. Now, 54 years later, new evidence may finally shine a light on this incredible story. On November 24, 1971, on the eve of Thanksgiving, a middle-aged man in a dark business suit, white shirt, and black tie boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 from Portland to Seattle. He paid cash for a one-way ticket under the name Dan Cooper. The flight was supposed to take only 30 minutes, so short that passengers barely had time to settle into their seats. The Boeing 727-100, carrying 36 passengers, took off into a gray November evening. Cooper took seat 18C in the rear of the cabin, ordered a bourbon and soda, and remained calm and polite. There was no indication of what was about to happen. Shortly after takeoff, as the plane flew over the Cascade Mountains, Cooper handed a folded note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. At first, she thought it was a phone number and ignored it. But Cooper leaned in and whispered, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Opening his worn briefcase, she showed her what looked like red cylinders wired to a battery. Cooper's demands were precise and calculated. $200,000 in cash, specifically in $20 bills, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane upon arrival. Captain William Scott immediately contacted Air Traffic Control, beginning one of the most unusual operations in aviation history. For nearly 2 hours, Flight 305 circled over Puget Sound while frantic activity unfolded on the ground. The FBI was notified, and banks scrambled to assemble the ransom in small bills, photographing every serial number. The president of Northwest Orient Airlines authorized full compliance, ordering all staff to cooperate with the hijacker. Through it all, Cooper remained unnervingly calm, demonstrating striking self-control and attention to detail. He wasn't just hijacking a plane, he was managing the situation with surgical precision. The crew later noted that he was polite, almost a gentleman, even insisting on paying his drink tab and leaving a generous tip. When the plane finally landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport, the city was already swarming with law enforcement. The money and parachutes were delivered to the aircraft. True to his word, Cooper released all 36 passengers unharmed. The only people left on board were the pilot, the co-pilot, the flight engineer, and one flight attendant, Tina Mucklow. Cooper ordered the crew to refuel and fly to Mexico, but he issued very specific flight instructions. Maintain an altitude below 10,000 feet, keep the speed under 200 knots, leave the landing gear down, and set the wing flaps to 15 degrees. When the crew explained that the plane couldn't reach Mexico City under those conditions without refueling, Cooper agreed to a stopover in Reno, Nevada. These demands revealed a deep knowledge of the Boeing 727. It was the only commercial airliner of its time with a built-in aft air stair that could be lowered during flight. Cooper clearly knew that Boeing and the CIA had conducted flight tests with that specific staircase lowered back in 1964. Around 8:13 p.m. Pacific Time, as the aircraft flew over the rural woodlands of Washington State near Ariel, the crew felt a sudden pressure bump, the distinct sensation of the rear door opening and the cabin pressure shifting. The plane's nose pitched upward. D.B. Cooper had jumped into the freezing, stormy night. The temperature outside was 7 degrees below zero. He was wearing a business suit and loafers with $200,000 strapped to his body. When the Boeing 727 landed in Reno hours later, the cabin was empty. The only evidence left behind was Cooper's black clip-on tie, 8 cigarette butts, and 2 of the 4 parachutes. The hijacker himself had dissolved into the darkness. The next morning brought one of the largest manhunts in American history. Helicopters hovered low over the misty pine forests of Washington. Hundreds of FBI agents, police officers, and soldiers combed through the mud and frost. But there was nothing. No parachute, no torn fabric, no body. It was as if the forest had simply swallowed the man who jumped with a fortune on his chest. The FBI launched one of the longest investigations in its history. Command posts were set up near Vancouver and Portland. Maps were covered in red circles marking drop zones. Locals were interviewed, rivers were dragged, and military jets scanned the terrain. They even used an SR-71 Blackbird to photograph the flight path. But every lead turned into a dead end. The name Dan Cooper led nowhere. No records, no fingerprints, no history. But when the story hit the press, a simple mistake changed everything. A reporter misheard the name and printed D.B. Cooper instead of Dan. The error stuck, transforming the alias into a legend. Suddenly, D.B. Cooper wasn't just a suspect, he was a symbol of audacity, mystery, and the perfect escape. Nearly a decade after Cooper vanished into the rain, the case had gone cold. But on February 10, 1980, a discovery reignited the investigation. 8-year-old Brian Ingram was vacationing with his family on the banks of the Columbia River at a place called Tennebar. While clearing space for a campfire, the boy unearthed 3 rotting bundles of $20 bills still held together by rubber bands. The serial numbers matched the ransom money from 1971. It was the first tangible proof that the myth was real. The bills were corroded, their edges rounded and matted together, suggesting they had been tumbled by the river current for years. But the find raised more questions than answers. Had the money washed down from Cooper's landing zone naturally? A hydrologist noted that the Washougal River was the only tributary that could have carried the cash to that specific spot. Yet the rest of the money was never found, not in the woods and not in circulation. While the world debated the Tennebar discovery, one man refused to let the case die. Dan Grider, a retired commercial pilot with nearly 20 years of experience investigating the Cooper case, became obsessed with the details. To him, this wasn't just a legend, it was a puzzle that had a solution. Grider reconstructed the flight path with painstaking accuracy, studying weather archives and radar plots. His research led him to interview retired foresters and locals who remembered strange events from the early 70s. These memories eventually pointed him toward a storage unit in Utah, linked through obscure logs and abandoned contracts. Inside, he found cardboard boxes filled with documents, personal effects, and an aviation kit that showed professional-level training. Among the items were logbooks detailing jumps, altitudes, and wind estimates, data that aligned perfectly with Cooper's skill set. These artifacts led Grider down a path few had dared to fully explore. The methods recorded in the logs mirrored a hijacking that took place just 5 months after Cooper disappeared. The man behind that second hijacking was Richard Floyd McCoy Jr., a decorated Vietnam War helicopter pilot, an experienced skydiver, and a family man from Utah. On April 7, 1972, using the alias James Johnson, McCoy boarded United Airlines Flight 855. 20 minutes after takeoff, he showed a flight attendant a hand grenade and a pistol, demanding $500,000 and 4 parachutes. The plane landed in San Francisco, the demands were met, and McCoy jumped out over rural Utah. The similarities to the Cooper case were undeniable. McCoy chose the same aircraft type, the Boeing 727 with the aft stairs. He used similar tactics, demanded parachutes and cash, and jumped mid-flight. Every decision reflected the logic of a man who had studied the Cooper disappearance in detail. But unlike Cooper, McCoy was caught. The FBI arrested him 2 days later. In his home, they found $499,970 of the ransom money, along with a parachute, a jumpsuit, and an electric typewriter matching the ransom note. McCoy was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. 2 years later, he escaped. McCoy and 3 other inmates crashed a garbage truck through the main gate of Lewisburg Penitentiary. 3 months later, the FBI tracked him to Virginia Beach. When agents moved in to arrest him, a shootout ensued and Richard McCoy was killed. Decades later, Dan Grider's investigation led him to McCoy's children, Chante and Rick McCoy III. In their dusty attic, hidden behind boxes of family linens, Grider found a canvas bundle. Inside was a military-grade parachute. The stitching had been altered, the lines were neatly repacked. A closer inspection revealed modifications that spoke volumes. Reinforced buckles and lines shortened with precision for a specific type of deployment. Grider realized immediately that this was a tool engineered for a flawless exit. Crucially, the unique modifications matched the work of Earl Causey, the expert skydiver who had provided the parachutes for the 1971 Cooper hijacking. Causey had made specific changes to the ripcord arrangement on the NB-8 parachute. These unique modifications made the parachute, in Causey's own words, literally 1 in a billion. In September 2023, Grider turned the parachute and the jump logs over to the FBI. 2 months later, agents raided the McCoy family property in North Carolina. After the death of their mother, Karen McCoy, in 2020, Richard's children finally decided to speak. For decades, they had stayed silent, fearing their mother could be implicated. In fact, Karen McCoy had admitted in court proceedings back in 1992 that she helped her husband with his 1972 hijacking, buying the parachute, typing the instructions, and driving the getaway car. Now, after 54 years of silence, the McCoy children revealed their belief. Their father was D.B. Cooper. Experts remain skeptical. The FBI originally ruled out McCoy because he was only 27 at the time of the Cooper hijacking, while witnesses described Cooper as a man in his mid-40s. Yet, the discovery of the parachute with Causey's unique modifications is the most significant physical evidence to surface since the case was officially closed in 2016. The FBI has not publicly confirmed a reopening of the investigation, but the raid in North Carolina suggests the file is active. Rick McCoy III provided a DNA sample, and agents reportedly discussed exhuming his father's body to compare it against the clip-on tie Cooper left on the plane. The D.B. Cooper case remains the only unsolved commercial airplane hijacking in U.S. history. More than half a century after a man in a suit leaped into a storm, the truth is still hiding somewhere between legend and reality. Perhaps that uncertainty is Cooper's true legacy, a mystery so perfect that even time cannot destroy it.